Hello and welcome to our complimentary webinar, which is brought to you today in partnership with Microfocus, and it's entitled Workflow Modernisation, the Business Benefits. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of today's special guests, Steve, Peter and Alex, we want to engage you in the conversation, spark your interest, as well as provide some ideas to take back to your respective businesses. To round off the session, we'll be having a Q&A. I'm Fiona Keogh, CEO of Auscontact and your moderator for today. While we're waiting for everyone to join us, let's use the time to quickly run through some housekeeping with you. Remember to interact with us to maximise the benefit, and as you know, there's no need to take too many notes because we'll be providing you with a copy of the webinar. To interact with us, please use the Q&A button on the control panel. You can ask questions or make comments for Steve, Peter, Alex or myself from time to time. Don't forget, we are having a Q&A at the end of the webinar, so type your questions as we go along so you don't forget to ask them. I'm also very excited to share that 3 attendees will win a Microfocus business value assessment valued at $2,500 each. To go into the draw to win, you need to ask a question during the Q&A and stay until the end of the webinar. Winners will be announced post the webinar. If you're listening through headphones or speakers and experience any issues with your internet connection, please note that on the control panel, you can click the raise hand button and the Auscontact team will rush to your aid, or you can revert to the registration confirmation email. And all the relevant phone numbers and access codes are available there for you today. So I know lots of you are very familiar with asking questions, but let's just try that Q&A button on the control panel, just in case you haven't asked a question. And the question I'm going to ask of you for practice today is maybe a politically charged question. It is, do you think New South Wales and Victoria will be in lockdown for Christmas? Now, I'm going to share a little bit of a personal experience with you. We've just been through Father's Day in Australia, and my husband has had his very first Father's Day in 28 years without his kids, except for his 4-legged fur baby. Okay, so Cassie, Ruth and Francois are saying, no, Brad said, no, we're going to be open. So that's good news. An anonymous attendee has said, no. So there you go. You heard it here first. We're going to be open in Victoria and New South Wales before Christmas. So with that, I'd love to introduce our speakers for today. And they are Steve Bowditch, Workflow Modernisation Specialist at Microfocus, Peter Woods, ANZ Pre-Sales Manager at Microfocus, and Alex Kim, Solutions Architect at Microfocus. And it's over to you, Steve. Welcome. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for the introductions, Fiona. I much appreciate that. Look, I'm Steve Bowditch. I'm a specialist in workflow modernisation. I've been in this business just over 20 years now, so I've seen quite a lot in that time, and hopefully we can use some of that today to get you enthused about the opportunity to work with us. So we're really looking forward to establishing a new and different point of view with you today. And that's really a point of view regards opening up and modernising workflows to support your business activities. First up, I'm just going to step through an agenda. What I'm going to do in my session is I'm going to define the problem we face and what's actually driving this from a business perspective. So that's really the business drivers. Peter's going to step in and take us through an application solution. But most importantly, in that application solution, he's going to show us 3 use cases. And then finally, Alex Kim's going to look at a couple of recent business cases and how we've accelerated returns for our customers. And that bit's really important because there isn't a need to delay on this. We can in fact show you the cost of delay and the reason to accelerate your adoption. Next slide, please. So today's consumers are definitely more demanding, and they're significantly less patient when looking for answers to their issues. We know that they talk about bad service to many others. That can often be as many as 14, although we would conjecture now that with the rise of social media and things like COVID really focusing us, that there's a lot more discussion. But regardless, that discussion about bad service is not good for our business. So our job is to ensure that you can meet and exceed the demand placed on you by the consumers, but also deliver service that exceeds their expectations. And our conjecture today is that building workflows that are fast and consistent is actually key to delivering that improved service. So I'm going to be a bit controversial to start with. We believe the contact center is dead, and long live the experience hub. Now, previously contact centers, they conjured up an image of lots of people working shifts, sitting in cubicles, but of course now today sitting at home. But most importantly, they're being constantly monitored on productivity, e.g. how many calls they can answer and what their first call resolution rates were. Now, historically, that role's been very reactive, with an emphasis being on responding to customer inquiries, customer queries, customer complaints, and doing that as quickly as possible. But unfortunately, the success was usually interpreted as minimizing the cost to the company. Now, customers tell us that this way of thinking has essentially been made obsolete by the rise of social media. And customers are now also recognizing that focusing too much on managing the direct cost of the contact center really detracts from the opportunity to factor in the opportunity cost of improving the way that they provide service to their customers. Conventional wisdom is saying that by 2025, this approach is going to be obsolete. In ancient history, we would conjecture that that's possibly being accelerated today. But what we're definitely going to see is contact centers morphing into these experience hubs, and how they perform is going to be more focused on how they work within the overall performance of the business. And that's why there's a desperate need now to modernize the way that the workflows are actually used. So what are businesses saying they want today? Well, there's definitely a need for a single pane of glass or a single view of the customer. And that's really driven by a constant set of merger and acquisition happening. And the merger and acquisition is all very easy for a business to conduct. But unfortunately, it comes with a lot of new applications that a contact center has to now navigate. So there's definitely a need for a single view of the customer. We're also seeing that contact centers want to avoid this multi-system handoff. So they really want seamless approach to the way that they interact with multiple systems. There's definitely a need for modernization of the user experience and customer experience. And contact centers are definitely telling us that they want to simplify the technology stack. Again, through the advent of merger and acquisition, there's so much technology being thrown at them. They don't want to focus on that. They want to focus on servicing their customers. There's a constant need to drive innovation. And of course, decreasing onboarding time is important with the turnover of staff, and decreasing the average call handling time is key to the success of the business. And of course, underlying all of this is the need to reduce cost, to increase the revenue of the business, and to mitigate the overall risk that the business runs. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Peter, who's going to look at how easily you can open up the workflows. But before we do that, we're going to run a quick poll on what's most important to you today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Steve. So Jess, if you could launch the poll, and what we're going to ask of you is, what is your business driving you to achieve? And we want you to select one option, which is the most important. Is it the single pane of glass or the single view of the customer? Is it seamless multi-stream handoff? Is it feeding user experience or customer experience modernisation? Is it decreasing onboarding time or decreasing average call handling time? Now, I know that Peter's going to talk a little bit about this, but we're not going to tell you what you told us until after Peter and Alex have spoken. So if you can keep answering the question while we hear from Peter. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and let's get rocking.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Fiona. I'm just get this poll out of the way. So scarily enough, I'm celebrating my 30th year at Micro Focus this month. Looks like the build's gone a bit strange. Here we go. And I manage a pre-sales and delivery team of 8, one of them, with collectively 150 years plus of IT experience. And that's almost as old as some of the applications we'll be talking about today. All right, so without further ado, so contact centers typically have a healthy mix of applications, of platforms and user interfaces. And excuse my hands, by the way, I can't help myself. Available for the operators to manage. In that mix, almost always one or more are terminal-based systems. They're solid, they're secure, but they've got a serial or a rigid workflow and complexities and idiosyncrasies that mandate an inch-thick manual or a formal onboarding and an unfamiliar or alien 80s style interface that most certainly of the younger generation and new onboarders take time to adapt to. So what we're going to take you through today is a number of use cases that demonstrate how our technology Micro Focus VeriStream Host Integrator can open up these legacy systems by building and exposing, quotes, workflows, as depicted in the bottom of the screen there, as application program interfaces or APIs or services or microservices from the data streams. Now, you're probably thinking, and I'll cut straight away, there is no screen rendering at this point. It's slightly technical. It's but also known as screen scraping. There is no coding or engineering required, and there is no change to the current system. Now, just an example, an alternative approach, which we support as well through our engineering tools of these systems, is to develop these APIs or these services through engineering or development. And a recent customer of ours estimated that for a single service, they took about 20 days to engineer and deploy that service to open up that workflow. Now, with VeriStream, that could take up to 2 days. So it's a 1/10 of the time to develop that same workflow. And if there's no appetite or budget or experience of engineering that API development, then VeriStream is a natural solution for that. Okay, our first use case, and perhaps the most obvious use of APIs created by VeriStream is to create a better user experience or customer experience. But why, as a contact center, would you need to do that? Your customer never sees your application. You're just a voice on the telephone. Bit provocative. But by opening up and breaking up that workflow into smaller APIs, the user interface designer can develop a new and more natural conversation with your customer. So with that serial or that rigidity of the workflow removed, no longer having to follow the legacy screen flow. It can reduce the keystrokes and default some of the values and build the intelligence into the API. And a modern, as depicted on the left there, modern, more familiar 21st century user interface for the operator with less chance for keyboard errors. And that leads to, and some of the clues and the answers that you previously put in the poll there. So this leads to significant reductions in average handling time, also known as increased productivity. We've seen examples of up to 50% reduction in that average call handling time. Reduced onboarding time. So with an intuitive user interface, there should be minimal time to proficiency. And we've had examples of where it takes anything up to 2 months or 8 weeks to be proficient using a terminal-based user interface. And finally, reduced turnover. What is your current turnover of course contact center operators? Well, and why do you think that's the case? Well, we've seen examples of 6 months, and perhaps that's industry standard with graduate summer jobs, turnover, etc. But this may be due to that alien or that complex, unintuitive user interface, and tied with that 2 months of time to proficiency. These numbers can be dramatically improved with a better customer experience. Our next use case, I'm sure will also be familiar to you too. Most large corporations acquire legacy systems through mergers and acquisitions, or to open up new channels to keep pace with competition, or to plug gaps in customer information. An operator will be juggling several queries across many applications to complete that single customer view, as Steve mentioned. Perhaps they're copying the name and address from one application on an AS400 server, validating a tax file number from a feed from the ATO in another, and checking the customer's credit limit from another application hosted on an IBM mainframe, etc., etc. You get the idea. Now, if each of these inputs or these calculations or these functions could be accessible as an API, regardless of the platform in which the application is hosted, the customer information could be presented to the operator in a single view, or sometimes referred to, and again, Steve mentioned it, as a single pane of glass or a dashboard. And this again could have a significant effect and positive effect on productivity and the average call handling time. Okay, and our final use case for today offers benefits from those exact same APIs created in the first and second use cases to open up those terminal-based functions, but this time to your supporting cast, the application test teams. And terminal-based testing applications typically involves an A4 folder with laminated screenshots detailing a series of keystrokes and screens the tester must laboriously and manually follow to validate each of those functions of the application, and ensuring that they remain the same after a series of changes that's been made by the development team. Well, in some cases, we've also seen these scripts automated with screens captured and compared for functional regression. And when used, this system is less labor intensive, but complex to manage. And in an environment where the applications and the screens are subject to change, and if the automated script cannot be synchronized effectively with that back-end server or mainframe hosting those transactions. So our third use case, again, utilizes those same APIs, but this time to simplify and optimize the testing by letting VeriStream manage synchronization between the automated test or the feed and the back-end application to take feeds from the modern testing tools, as depicted in the images on the left there, to validate functional regression and to throw the kitchen sink at it to validate behavior under extreme and heavy loads. The testing tool will feed input into the API, not the screen, into the API, completely oblivious to the fact that the application is running on an IBM mainframe, an AS400, a Unisys server, or a Tandem, etc. You got the idea. So it takes away the complexity of those back-end applications. So in summary, once you've opened up the application through those APIs, the world's your oyster in terms of improving the operator customer experience through application modernization, opening up, reducing infrastructure complexity through infrastructure modernization, and reusing those same APIs to drive and simplify automated functional and load testing and modernizing the testing processes. And probably most importantly, all with no change to the existing application operations, no engineering required to expose the APIs. So I've now covered three separate and very different, and hopefully you would agree, innovative but technical use cases to justify as justification for change. I'd like to now hand over to Alex, who will take you through a couple of use cases, but this time from the perspective of how they made the financial case for change. So, and with that, over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Peter. I'm Alex Kim. I'm Solutions Architect from Micro Focus. I have been involved with various modernization projects around the world. So I am very familiar with pain and difficulties that the customers are experiencing. So hopefully I can deliver values to the audience. All right. I'm going to introduce the business benefits that we can provide with VeraStream using two case studies. We have a tool, BBA value assessment, business value assessment called the BBA. We have developed with our partner in order to quantify business benefits based on customers' basic information, such as the number of business users and the time spent on their development, as well as improvement rate for their prior customers. Our BBA report also provides commercial insight into the project with various financial checkpoints like the ROI and the payback period. What you're looking at the screen on the right side is the actual the outcome from our BBA report. Let me start with the key challenges in the market today. As you are aware, the cost of staff and products is increasing rapidly, and customers' expectations are going through the roof. In addition, new competitors are entering the market every year. A major Australian insurance company was also struggling with their business productivity in their call centers and their development productivity as well. In the POC, we identify two key benefits that VeraStream would provide. They were able to encapsulate their multi-step screen workflow with VeraStream. Previously, in their call centers, they had to navigate 21 screens in order to calculate an insurance quote. Now, they need only a few web services to accomplish the same tasks, eliminating extraneous screen navigation and substantially reducing their work hours. This will also result in cost savings for their customers. Another benefit is the reduction of their development time. Prior to implementing our product, it took the company 20 days to develop a new web service. Now, it takes them only 2 days to do this, because once you encapsulate screen navigation as a service, you can expose it as a web service in just a few simple steps with VeraStream Web Builder. In other words, they have improved their development productivity by 90% with VeraStream. Please look at the screen on the right side. Our BBA. So I gathered the customer's basic information, which is very simple information, and entered the improvement rates into our BBA template and generate a BBA report. So our BBA report indicates that the customer can experience $5.7 million in benefits over 3 years with an investment of $1.53 million. The ROI is 276%, and then the payback period is 7 months. Considering the 6 months project duration, the customer can reach the break-even point 1 month after project completion. And the do-nothing option would cost them about $263K every quarter. Let me explain the second example. Next slide, please, Peter. Thank you. So the other example, the second example of VeraStream implementation is our project with a major international financial organization in the US. I'd like to outline 2 benefits of our product and how VeraStream improved their test automation process. Please check the BBA report on the screen. This is the actual BBA report I generated based on customers' information and improvement rates that we identified during the project. The ROI is around 1700% over 3 years because their commercial benefit is much higher than their investment. And their payback period is 8 months. I'll explain the benefits are in detail. The first benefit is the test automation. Let me briefly explain the background of test automation framework for your better understanding. In order for any test automation framework to succeed, the relevance of test data is critical. According to a Gartner report, the average organization loses about $40 million annually through poor data quality. Without a properly conditioned test data, the automation suite may not provide the desired results. For large complex business applications, conditioning test data to the desired state can be a very challenging task in itself. Previously, the company had to define test data and categorize it for functional testing with a terminal emulator and a spreadsheet. Since it was a semi-automated job using the Hilapi API against a terminal emulator, it was a cumbersome, problematic, and difficult to maintain across the organization. When errors like typo occurred, they had to spend another 2 days to correct the errors. With VeraStream, the company was able to automate the process, cutting the completion time from days to 1 hour. Now, loan accounts, in other words, the test data, can be created in the desired state and verified with a cross-check in a completely automated manner for functional testing as well as performance testing. The second benefit that we identified during the project is the functional testing. When the company runs a loan test, a number of processes have to be completed, such as a background check, a credit check. Previously, the customer had to trigger the process individually and manually. Now, every process is automatic with the APIs generated by VeraStream. From retrieving conditioned test data from the database to the additional processes, which is reducing the time to process functional testing from a week to 30 minutes. Hopefully now you can understand why the ROI is so high, because we just reduced their testing time from a week to 30 minutes. Another point that I'd like to emphasize here is that the reusability of APIs. They created APIs during the test data automation project, and they reused them for functional testing as well as performance testing. So as you can see on the screen, our BBA analysis, again, I gathered this basic customers information and the improvement rates that I identified during the project. I entered them into a BBA template and generate a BBA report. So the BBA report indicates that the company can experience about $9.46 million in benefits over 3 years with an investment of about $1 million. The ROI is 700%, and then the payback period is 8 months. And thanks to the successful implementation of VeraStream in one application, now they are applying VeraStream to 4 more applications. So in summary, I introduced 2 business case studies, one for increasing operator efficiency through application modernization, and the other for API-based test automation through process automation modernization. Hopefully, we can have a chance to identify the business benefit that VeraStream would provide for your applications. Our next step is Steve will introduce calls to action. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you for the application of the BVA tool to show how we've accelerated returns for our customers. This is clearly very important. Investments have to be made, but at the same time, we want really fast ROI. Again, thank you, Peter, for your wisdom and knowledge on how to use VeraStream. Now, in closing, it's important to note that you can start on this journey with us without disturbing any IT strategies and plans. Why is that? Well, quite simply, there's no change required, there's no engineering required, no architecture, and most importantly, this can be done in a programming-free environment. All we need is the people who actually know the workflow, and of course, that's you, the audience. So as Fiona's previously explained, the first step is to engage with us in a BVA. And through the generosity of Micro Focus, we can provide 3 prizes of a 1-day, and that's an elapsed day, business value assessment for those who ask a question, and most importantly, for those of you who stay to the end of the session. So with that, I'll hand back to Fiona to organize the Q&A. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Steve, Alex, and Peter. So, Jess, if I could ask you to share the results of the poll, which we promised we would do. Well, look at that, Peter. We can get you back online. The single pane of glass tied with the seamless multi-system handoff, followed by feeding user experience and customer experience modernisation. What say you?
That's interesting because lost the results now. There we go. Thank you. So that would, well, that's evidence there that the complexity of the infrastructure overrides the, well, I think probably the call handling time probably is a net result of the simplification of the infrastructure that poor operators are having to manage. So you may recall what's the puppeteer in Pinocchio called? Geppetto, is it? You might imagine he's the kind of guy, the typical operator is trying to manage those several strings, those several multi-systems at the same time. And the solution to that is obviously to try and simplify and encapsulate that single customer view. So I'm delighted that those 2 are the first on the list. And of course, the modernized user interface is, again, probably part and parcel of that single pane of glass as well. So predictable, but heartening to know that hopefully the presentation and the benefits of VeraStream are very much in line with the requirements of the market. Great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And keep those questions coming in, guys. There is a question around, dare I say, the pandemic, and damn, I'm going to ask a pandemic question. So with the pandemic, have you observed a change in focus in various organisations about the need or recognition of the need to modernise their workflows, or are people kind of still doing what they've always done?
Well, there's that 3-letter acronym WFH, which is a consequence of COVID and the pandemic. And what that has done is exacerbated the need for accessibility of those legacy and digital systems from the workplace, from the we are in the new workplace, aren't we, which is the home. And Micro Focus has complementary technology to VeriStream, which is called Host Access for the Cloud, which enables browser-based access to those legacy systems. And I think we have an awful lot of success in helping work from homers access those systems, regardless of the platform they reside on, and regardless of the whether it's your son or your daughter's or your family's laptop, you need access to those systems. So yes, very much a shift in requirements. Has to be secure, has to be accessible, but also in line with this message, has to be a productive environment, a productive user interface to access to.
Thanks, Peter. We've got a question from Margie that's just come in, and she wants to know whether you've implemented the system into any local government organisations, and if so, what were the outcomes? Who'd like to take that one? Don't be shy.
I think, Steve, I'm going to give you that one to you, because I think you've got a story from, it wasn't in the local government, but it was from a well-respected telco, right?
Yes, we do. Yes, thank you, Peter. Whilst we haven't done anything yet in local government, and that's something which we are keen to address, we do have an example where we've helped automate, in fact, provided effectively an almost robotic situation or solution for a business problem at one of the telcos in Australia. So yeah, we've got good experience in deploying this to address both people-related issues, so contact center related issues, but also issues which are starting to emerge in terms of robotics as well. So yeah, it is a size that fits a couple of different situations.
Thanks, Steve. A question around your final slide, which is around the call to action, where you said you just need people who understand business workflows enough to improve them. Tell us about, and I'm sure this doesn't happen, any of the rookie errors that you may have observed.
Yes, rookie errors. Okay, not getting the right stakeholders to the table is a clear rookie error. This requires stakeholders throughout the business to be involved, and then probably not really understanding the true, I guess, metrics of success. Now, this is two areas where we can really assist our customers. We've got good experience now in understanding who to bring to the table, and we've got equally good experience in understanding what sort of metrics are actually important for those people who come to the table. So yeah, that I hope addresses that question.
Yeah, and I would imagine, Steve, that in that workflow there's taking care of compliance and risk appetites and all of those normal type business, important components of doing business these days.
Well, absolutely. Compliance is a very key issue, especially data privacy today. And all of this can be accommodated very, very easily in terms of opening up and modernizing the workflows. Love it.
So Imi's got a question. Well, she's actually got two. There are actually two. So there's a sneaky two question. Okay, so they said insightful coverage of the topic. I have two questions. I'd like to, number one, understand what were the main recurring challenges, e.g. initial roadblocks observed across businesses. And then secondly, what were some of the key learnings that can be shared?
Peter, do you want to handle that?
I'll take one of them. We shouldn't let Alex off the hook here.
That's true.
No, I'm gonna answer the further roadblocks. So making sure, I think roadblocks, we've got to make sure that everybody's on. I think Steve's kind of covered it in a way, but I may be answering this in a slightly different way than expected. But it's making sure everyone is on board. I think it's interesting because there's because this is a non-invasive and a non-engineering approach to modernization, sometimes you may see a few noses put out of joint in our development and in engineering teams, and consider that this is competition to that approach. What this is really doing, though, is fast tracking or giving the engineering team or giving the business a quick win to buy the time to do things in a different way. So the business and finance teams are very keen on delivering better customer experience, because it's the most important thing to any customer oriented company that's selling something to a customer base, is to improve that experience and offer value. If you can do that quickly in a non-invasive way, to offer the time to do something more maybe strategically with the infrastructure, then you're buying yourself the time and potentially the budget to fund that activity down the line. So this isn't a competitive solution to an engineering approach. This is a collaborative approach, and it shouldn't be seen as the engineering team shouldn't be seen as a roadblock. This is something that they can collaborate with and embrace.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Peter, maybe one of the roadblocks is getting the right stakeholders engaged from the get-go, and having a champion at the highest possible level within the organisation, sitting within the C-suite, saying, this is the way for us to go.
Yes, and I think experience has shown us that all key stakeholders have to be on board, and this is a vision that's easily grasped by the business, because they can see it, because they live and breathe business workflow day in, day out. But as Alex demonstrated and presented, there has to be financial gain, there has to be financial benefit, and without financiers on side, nothing ever happens in any of our corporations, I can guarantee. So all stakeholders, including finance, business, engineering team, and the implementation team as well. So thanks for that.
Yeah, so the second part, and maybe that's the hospital pass to Steve, I don't know, or to Alex, what are some of the key learnings that you can share?
I know many people are here business-oriented, but I'd like to emphasize the reusability of the APIs, because it is also related to the commercial side as well. As I shared in the second example, once they create the APIs in the basic project, they can reuse it easily in other stages, and so that it can relate to the commercial benefits as well. If you look at the second example, the ROI is more than 700%, because their benefit is much higher than their investment. Investment is compared to their actual business benefit is small, because it comes from the reusability of our APIs. You can expose this usability, the APIs interact with other legacy systems, or you can use this API to build a new business model. So I'd like to emphasize one more time the reusability of our APIs, not only technically, commercially as well.
It's I just want to butt in there. Thank you, Alex. We talk about this all day, and thanks for reminding me. It's kind of the dream ticket in pre-sales and sales, to have a product where you have one of many entry points, and the benefits of that single, in our case, that API can be used in so many different contexts once you've created it for one use case. So you may have bought into this concept based upon the need to improve your customer experience, but as we said, probably ad nauseum through the presentation, is that same API can then, without any other rework, can be used in many different other contexts. So as far as business or cost justification, you've not just got that single point. So it makes our life so much easier when we can do that, and then help cross-sell that across the corporation. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, that's great, guys. So it's one of the key things, the financial aspect. But I just wonder whether you guys have any stories that you can share, because we talked about UX and CX as being very important components. Have you got any examples that you are able to share about where there's been a positive impact, in particular on the customer experience, because we've got 90% of CEOs saying they're going to differentiate themselves based on the great service that they're going to provide to their customers, and this would clearly play into that.
I can take that one, Peter and Alex.
Great.
Yeah, look, it's one of these. It's a very interesting situation here, because on the one hand, this is the business actually gets to deliver something back to the technologists, but on the other hand, the business actually gets to do something for itself. And if you look at things like customer experience and user experience, technologists don't actually care about that. That's an almost alien concept to them. Whereas for the business, it's something they live and breathe every day. So what we've seen through the deployment of VeriStream is significant improvement in the ability of the business to manage customer and user experience. And I think certainly Alex talked to this, the ability to reduce the number of screens that you have to interact with from, I think, 20 down to 2 is a significant improvement in what the user gets to contend with. And if the user is actually improving the whole way they interact with customers, then that clearly improves the customer experience. So I think the writing's on the wall there. If we can help demystify the complexity of technology, there's a great opportunity to help users improve the way that they work, and that must ultimately translate into the way that a business improves that it interacts with its customers. And of course, then it gets to keep more customers for longer, and there's a greater opportunity to actually do more with those customers.
Yeah, I love it. What I love about it was what you shared about, being able to make changes, test and have it live within a couple of days, which can then show how well you as a business respond to customer needs.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely brilliant. And I guess, one of the ways of looking at it is that you're almost democratizing. Should I say that aloud with the engineers? Anyway, so a question for you, Peter. And it's a technical question, but we love a good technical question. So does VeriStream only support IBM mainframe terminal-based applications?
Great, a question I can answer. Okay, so no. In fact, it's the most obvious choice. But the important thing is it's not just the platform; it's the data stream, the data type. So in obviously IBM mainframe terms, that's 3270. We also support I-series or IS400s, 5250s. Now you're going to test me on these. Are these four number acronyms kind of thing, digit codes? But there's also Unisys mainframes or mid-range boxes, Tandem, etc., etc. But of course the classic VT100 Unix and Linux boxes and Windows terminals as well. So regardless of the platform, that's probably represents 90% of the platforms out there that host legacy character-based terminal systems. So no, that's part of the story of that single pane of glass, that encapsulation of an infrastructure is that support of multiple data streams.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona.
I think we got you all excited then because you were quoting acronyms and typical techo. I love it. So Alex, a question for you. So what skill sets do we need to get started with VeriStream?
Thank you for asking. That's what I know about the answer. So VeriStream is a non-invasive solution. Steve already emphasized it at his last slide. Nothing needs to be installed on host systems. So no advanced coding or programming expertise is necessary. It also provides an easy-to-use design tool. So I can say that application knowledge is all you need to get started.
Wow, that sounds super quick and easy. Steve, we touched on this a little bit earlier. But I'd like to dig a little bit deeper, because you've obviously worked on a number of programs or of work. You know, who do you need buy-in to get this going right from the start? And who are the stakeholders? Oh my goodness, this is a triple prong question. Who are the stakeholders, and what are the metrics?
Okay, yeah, good question. And it's something which we've learned from over the last few years. It's absolutely essential that you get the head of business units, the head of business lines, EGMs associated with business lines. You know, senior business leaders have got to buy into this. At the end of the day, they control the purse strings. The technologists don't. They'd like to think they do, but they don't. The business controls the purse strings. The business wants the investment. The business wants to make the improvement. So it's absolutely key, and it's probably in the balance of I don't know, 75 to 25 percent key business leaders. Then you probably do need some technologists along for the ride, but they don't call the shots any longer. It's not to say that they're subservient, but they need to just understand that there's a certain amount they have to do, but the real heavy lifting gets done by the business folks, the folks in the contact centers, and most importantly, the people who understand the workflows. So that's the stakeholders. The key metrics are very, very simple. It's about, you know, what opportunity cost is actually being lost as a result of not making the change. The change is very easy to make, but if you don't make it, why are you still contending with, for example, multiple systems and having to hand off between them, and then making the you could call them rookie errors. They're probably not rookie errors. They're just errors which are made when you have to hand off between systems. You know, what happens when you cut and paste and you don't get all of the field? What happens if you have to write something down and you translate that incorrectly? This is really costing the business a lot of money. So it's those key metrics. You know, what's the cost of not changing that probably drive the biggest decisions now.
Yeah, I must have been some time ago. I was involved in a process, modernisation, where there were 37 different handoff points. So 37 different points of failure into different departments, and there was a lot of this going on.
Yes.
And all of that sort of stuff. So this sounds like an ideal solution to that finger pointing that we don't mean to do, but you know, it's never me. It's always, you know, someone else that's responsible for that. So we're out of questions. So what I would love from each of you, we're going to start with you, Alex, is closing remarks.
Thanks, Fiona. Thank you for joining our webinar again. Reusability is a simple and easy tool, but their benefit is much higher than you expected. Hopefully, we can have a chance so that we can identify the business benefits that Reusability would provide for your applications. Thank you for joining again.
Thanks, Alex. And Peter, some thoughts from yourself.
Yeah, well, the theme of today is very much getting value out of those terminal-based systems, and I think the value of these systems is typically they've been around. If they're around today in 2021, then they've they're still around. They're still offering value, and they've still been around for probably a couple of decades in some cases. There's a number of reasons why they're still around, because they offer significant value to the business, that they're impossible to replace. But one thing they've got in common is they haven't been modernized, or the user interface hasn't been kept up to date. So this is an opportunity to unlock that value from those legacy systems and bring them forward into the dashboard or the single pane of glass. And I think and we can help you achieve that very, very quickly.
Thanks, Peter. And finally, Steve, closing remarks.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I love the analogy you gave of it wasn't an analogy, it's real life experience of the 32 different handoffs. That's, if that's happening in one place, it's happening in many, many places. Look, the issue we face today is that what we talked about this morning can be done. It can be done easily, it can be done quickly. I guess the call to action is don't delay. And I would say for those folks who get to win one of the prizes, enjoy the BVA opportunity, because it'll be quite enlightening and it could lead to something really in terms of a great experience for you.
Thanks, Steve. And thank you to Team Microfocus for being so generous with the business value assessment being made available to our attendees today. And thank you to Peter, Alex and Steve for sharing their expertise. And to everyone that joined us today, I thank you for your time. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. And of course, I'm going to say, stay safe and see you next time. Thanks, guys.